everybody. I'm Marcos Molitzis. I am here with Carrie Eleveld. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos, The Brief, our weekly show about politics. Today, we're going to be talking about Arizona. Arizona is ground zero in our fight for our democracy. It was a 50-50 state in the 2020 presidential election and was won by Democrats thanks to massive turnout gains amongst Latinos, American Indians, and probably college-educated white women in the suburbs. Democrat Mark Kelly won a special election Senate seat that he must defend in 2022 in a 50-50 Senate. So we got a 50-50 country. We got a state Arizona that's 50-50. There's a 50-50 Senate. Arizona's other senator, Kyrsten Sinema, refuses to budge on the Jim Crow filibuster, meaning minority Republicans can stymie most Democratic legislation in that 50-50 Senate. And Republicans from all over the country are flocking to marvel at a sham Republican audit, and an audit in quotes, attempting to find evidence of voter fraud that never happened. The state's hero Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, who also won a close election in 2020, is running for governor, which could prove critically important to prevent additional voting restrictions ahead of the 2024 presidential election. And of course, Arizona will be a fiercely contested presidential battleground into the near and mid future. Today, we're going to be talking to Arizona progressive champion, Representative Ruben Gallego. And we're going to talk about his state's pivotal role in the battle for our democracy. And Carrie, it is an actual circus in Arizona. And it seems like it really is ground zero for this fight for our democracy, doesn't it?
It sure does. I mean, what is going on there is insane. And in case people, the Washington reporters, the national media tends to be mostly focused on what's going on in Washington. Excuse me. But what we're seeing in Arizona, if any of our listeners haven't been totally keeping up, is all of the, first of all, the Senate Republicans. Let's just set the stage for anyone who hasn't sort of paid attention to this sham audit. Senate Republicans ordered this audit and then handed it off to this group called Cyber Ninjas that had zero actual experience in conducting an audit on elections, a review of sorts of the ballot. Then the ballots, the machines got handed over them. They are a partisan, owned by private-owned company that supported Trump. And, it's just a mess. And what we find out now, just recently today, is that Maricopa County officials, and Maricopa County is where this audit is taking place, supposed audit, right? They say they can no longer use the machines that were handed over to the Cyber Ninjas and all of their volunteer squad, that are conducting this audit. And because it's too compromised. So now, that was like a $6.1 million contract with these, Dominion voting systems for these machines, right? And I think they were about halfway through that contract. So now Maricopa County has to come up with new machines for, they're using a reserve for some of the elections this year, but by next year, they're going to have new machines. And on top of that, you've got Republican lawmakers from across the country, from places like,
Carrie, we have Ruben Gallego with us, so let's bring him on, and we can pull him in, and you can ask him about this craziness that's happening in Arizona. Congressman Ruben Gallego represents Arizona's 7th congressional district. He's an Iraq war vet, and he's one of the best progressives in Congress. Definitely one of my favorites. Ruben, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I was just kind of bringing our listeners up to speed on this. We're so happy to have you because we want you to make sense of what the heck is going on in Arizona. I mean, I want to know because a poll came out today of Arizona voters that found, I'm sure you've seen it, I think, that found that for a plurality of 49 to 46% of Arizona voters were against or opposed to this sham audit that's taking place. But more importantly, independent voters opposed it by 18 points. And then you've got all of these, Republican lawmakers from across the country coming in, descending on Arizona. Pilgrimage,
Right.
and then they're going to take this great idea back to their states and try to do it in their own states. But it's a mess. It's a mess. And I just wonder, I guess, as a baseline, what kind of backdrop this is for 2022 in your state. Are Republicans like shooting themselves in the foot here because they ordered this audit and then they, just let us know what you think.
Well, first of all, whenever you're dealing with Arizona Republicans, never try to make the insane sane, right? What you see is what you get. It is crazy. Kind of knowing the history of Arizona, it's either designed to things, number one, shore up the base of Republicans, or number two, to basically grift, right? Try to bring in as much money through some sham operation. And right now, the Arizona Republican Party is falling apart. They are, have very little opportunities in terms of raising money. So this kind of sham audit actually is a very good way for them to raise money and also distract from the fact that they're losing elections. They've lost the last two general elections. They turned the state essentially a light shade of blue because of their extremism. The one thing that I think people have to remember is that Arizona was the proto-Trump state before Trump even existed. We're the ones that were talking about border walls, locking them up, all this type of stuff. And the only thing that Republicans understand whenever they start losing elections is to go deeper and deeper into their base. They don't know how to reach out. They don't have any moderation. And so this is kind of a spiral, it's called a death spiral with the Arizona Republican Party in Arizona.
So
I like that.
Yeah, it's very, very optimistic. And I mean, the turnaround in Arizona from 2016 to 2020 was dramatic. And I don't think people quite really recognize how massive that shift is. A lot of attention goes to Georgia. And Georgia got that extra bonus because of the runoff. But the Democratic performance was bigger, that the difference, that the growth in Democratic performance was bigger in Arizona than it was in Georgia. It was over 30% turnout. And Donald Trump got his vote out. I mean, their turnout was also up quite a bit, but we got our turnout even bigger.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, from what I've seen, a lot of that was because of turnout with Latino voters, turnout with American Indian voters, and gains in the suburbs. But then there's also this undercurrent that maybe Trump made gains with Latinos in 2020. What do you see in Arizona? Is there a risk that those voters, one, that Republicans may make further gains with Latino voters? And two, is there any fear that they just may not even turn out in 2022, given historical voting trends?
So at least in my district, we only saw maybe a 1% shift towards Donald Trump among Latino voters. And that we can't really tell specifically because they might also just be white conservative voters that live in Latino areas that came out and voted more than usual. But the reason we feel that shift happened is just natural incumbency. Latinos will vote for an incumbent, especially one that, is saying you're going to get back to work, one that is, trying to fight the shutdown because of COVID-19. In my district, we never stopped walking. I think that was the biggest mistake that happened last cycle. We knew my district, in order to get out the vote, we have to canvass, and we continued canvassing during COVID-19 in a very safe manner. And I think that one of the things that people are underestimating is like how close the elections were in Arizona. The elections were close because of COVID-19. I think without COVID-19, we actually win the state probably by 2 to 3 points versus the small amount. I do think that there is something to be said that our Latinos going to start sliding towards Republicanism. Maybe. I think Trump is an anomaly. It's, he has 100% name ID. He's identified more as a businessman within the Latino community than he is a Republican. I think it does point to a couple other things, though, that you do need to actively work the Latino community. You need to actively be present and out there. And the fact that COVID-19 essentially shut down a lot of our opportunities to really reach out to the working class communities, I think, really affected us. you can't do Zoom organizing in working class Latino neighborhoods, right? That's not how it works. You have to actually go door to door and do old fashioned shoe leather conversations. And we just didn't do it. And in regards to whether the Republicans did, we know they did. And I think that's where the biggest failure that we saw within the Democratic circle, at least.
But I mean, how do you square that with that 30% increase in turnout? So there was a massive Democratic turnout. Are you saying that Latino areas specifically were not as high performing as other Democratic constituencies?
So the largest turnout among Latinos was actually young Latinos, which are more socially adept. You could hit them through
everything,
Facebook, text messaging, Snap. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. But what you also saw were older Latinos that were voting and voting a little more towards the right. Now, it wasn't as drastic, at least in Arizona. In other parts of the country, it was, and partly, again, that's part of the incumbency, but also, again, not having that I think face-to-face conversation to really push back on a lot of the Republican rhetoric that was out there.
How are you feeling about 2022? And then we'll probably move on. But I mean, if you think that Democrats could have won the state by a few more points than they actually did in 2020, what are you seeing in terms of enthusiasm on both sides of the aisle heading into next year?
I think right now the Democrats do have an advantage in Arizona, thank God. I think what is occurring with the Republican Party in terms of trying to fight the past election with the audit, the January 6th insurrection, I think is also going to weigh heavily with Latinos. Remember, a lot of us come from countries where we saw these types of coup. And I don't think that anyone really identified one party versus another party as being pro-coup. But I think now we can clearly say that the Republican Party is a pro-insurrectionist party. And I think that will actually have a lot of effect. In Arizona, I think it's all about making sure you figure out how to get the young Latino voters out. If you don't get young Latino voters out, you have results like 2010, 2014, where we had massive drop off. If you get young Latinos out, then you have 2018, where you had great successes here. So what can be helpful with that? If we are able to pass a lot of the Biden agenda, specifically also the earned income tax credit will be extremely helpful getting out young Latinos. When I say young Latinos, but I mean people from 18 to 30 who, some of them have kids, right? Mm-hmm. And so the child tax credit is going to be a big boom for the Latino, obviously for the Latino community, but also for Democrats. And if we can somehow make that a permanent thing, I think you would actually have great participation. So I think that we're going to have a really good year in 2022. The way the numbers have been going for the last, 10, I've been working in Arizona politics now for close to 18 years, I'd say, or 16 years. You're consistently seeing higher voter registration numbers. You're seeing more and more younger Latino politicians getting elected to office all over the state. So we really do have the kind of right atmosphere for us to turn out. And I think we just have to make sure we figure out what we deliver to them to actually encourage them to come out.
Well,
no, I love the enthusiasm.
Speaking of delivering, okay, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I know what you're going to ask, Carrie, and I'm sure the congressman knows as well. But
I'm sorry, I got to go.
I have one more question about 2022, and we have a governor's race in Arizona. We have Mark Kelly in that 50-50 Senate, an absolutely critical election for control of the Senate, which is hanging on the balance. Historically, the party that is in the White House loses midterm elections, loses those close elections. But Carrie and I had this theory that Donald Trump, with the Republican Party keeping Donald Trump front and center, that it sort of turns this more again into maybe 2020 all over again, or maybe even in a referendum on Donald Trump himself. And really, it seems to me that if that theory is true, Arizona would be ground zero, right? Because there's no state party that is more tied to Donald Trump than Arizona. As you see Republicans start to gear up their election, are they really clinging to Donald Trump? I mean, is that obsession with sticking with a loser, in full swing? Is that happening?
Oh, absolutely. Look, this Arizona Republican Party and the candidates are all about Trump. And the who's going to win a lot of these primaries is going to depend on, how close you get to Trump or whether you can even get the Trump endorsement. I think that's going to be a net positive for Democrats because I think we still get out our vote. I think there's a lot of Republicans and moderate Republicans, independents that won't vote for a Trump Republican. And also, I don't think the Trump base comes out as strong when Trump's not on the ballot. And you can never go the full Trump. It's not possible. So any of these candidates that do it, either they come off as not being genuine or it comes out seeming extreme. Only Trump can really deliver Trump and the Trump voter. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to have a net positive from this movement. Now, if Trump runs again in 2024, I can tell you I have other theories about what's going to happen with that election. But I also think he's actually do worse than he did in 2020 than in 2024.
Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
Well, you can't leave, Congressman. You can't leave. We're going to publish this
the
moment
line's breaking up. I'm sorry.
When you rip off your earpiece and run from our questions. No, so I mean, you clearly know where I'm headed in terms of delivering for the voters who voted Democrats into power, and a lot of progressives on our site, in particular, I read the comments, are really ticked off with a certain Senator Sinema from Arizona. And they basically feel like she's prioritizing the rights of Senate Republicans over, for instance, the voting rights of the American people, of American citizens. And people really wonder, does she even really believe in voting rights? I mean, she says she does. She signed on to the For the People Act, but it keeps on reiterating, that she won't do it. She's against removing the filibuster that creates this 60 vote threshold that basically gives Senate Republicans a veto power over Biden's agenda. And so I just was hoping that you would try to take us into, you obviously know a lot more about I keep on messing it up, Senator Sinema than most of us do. And I wonder, do you feel like, number one, she's behaving sort of consistently with sort of the political biography that she's created so far, who she's been as a, politician in Arizona to this point?
Well, I think, Kyrsten has run in always very tough races. And, one of her beliefs is that the way to win, which I think is correct in some regard, is you have to bring over crossover moderates and independents. I do think, though, that there is something to be said about the growing American electorate in Arizona and a future American electorate in Arizona. We have a lot of young people that are, registering every month. You have a lot of people moving in from out of state. And I think they value people over process. And what happens every day to make people's lives better does matter more. And I think she will gain more traction by delivering than trying to stick to a very antiquated process that's really rooted in the preservation of slavery. But I know Kyrsten. I've known Kyrsten for a long time. She once was my boss when we managed a campaign together in 2006. I was, with her in the state house while she was in the state Senate. We served in Congress together. I have hope, and I have real hope that she does change her mind once she realizes and notices that, Republicans are not going to budge on the Voting Rights Act, and they're just going to do everything they can to gut, the changing power dynamic that's happening in this country.
Does she have any history of changing her mind on things like that? Can you point to something where you're like, well, she was for this, and then she ended up, going the other way on it?
Well, I mean, certainly if you see her progression, she has gone from, being a very, I would say, very, very progressive, member of the state house to working as a moderate, in Congress. I've seen her, for example, take a position one way when it came to refugee status issues back in 2016, and when she and many of her colleagues realized that they overshot, they introduced legislation to basically modify their position. I think that was around 2015 or 2016. So it does happen. I think we have to continue doing our job. Those are our friends, help educate her or just give her more information. I think as Democrats in general, we have to make sure that we guard the fact that these not guard, but protect our options too, because at this point, we know what the Republicans in Arizona are trying to do. We know the Republicans nationwide are going to do. And hopefully, Kyrsten recognizes that too.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really sort of frustrating for some of us observing Republicans around the states working to restrict the vote. And I mean, these actions, I'm not sure if they're already trying to do it in Arizona. I mean, I'd be shocked if they're not, right?
They are, absolutely.
Yeah. And so it would make her reelection more difficult if Republicans have their way. So as a matter of self-preservation, you would think that she'd be motivated to make sure that the For the People Act passes. In addition, she clearly relishes the attention. And so in a 50-50 Senate, where her vote would be needed for any piece of legislation, she would be the queen of the Senate. It would be like Queen Sinema and King Manchin, and they would rule the roost. And so I don't understand why, just as a matter of self-interest, she doesn't do these things. And so is there something that you know about her that would sort of speak to that would explain why she clings to process as opposed to even just self-interest?
Look, I think she really does believe that the sticking to process helps her with crossover votes. And that's the only thing I can think of, to be honest. I still think, though, at the end of the day, delivering for people matters. And also our highest calling as representatives, as senators, should be the preservation of democracy. And when process is used to erode democracy, that's when process has to go for the defense of democracy. And I truly believe at the end of the day that Kyrsten understands that. She may be slow to the road, slow on the road to Damascus, but I think she will get there. That's what we can all work for, at least at this time.
Let me ask just one follow-up on this. I think Senator Manchin of West Virginia is a little bit more of a known quantity. And so people tend to talk about him more. He has sort of a longer legislative history in the Senate at this point, and has been a political figure for a slightly longer time. He seems at least committed to the idea of President Biden having a successful presidency. Do you believe in her heart of hearts, Senator Sinema is dedicated to that project?
I do. Yeah, I do. Look, I think I've had my policy disagreements with Senator Sinema many times, but I do think at her core, she is a good Democrat, and she understands that a Biden successful administration is both good for the country and good for her reelection in 2024. So I do think that she is going to try to find that balancing act, and I think she'll do the best when it comes to that.
So okay, so moving on, let's live in a fantasy world.
Good.
A fantasy world where the filibuster's gone because Sinema and Manchin saw the light, and a couple other holdouts saw the light. And you're looking towards, again, 2022 and even into 2024. If you could pass, a couple of pieces of legislation that you would know would sort of lock down that Democratic vote and would really boost our turnout in these next two critical cycles, what would you focus on?
Well, I'd probably would focus on the three things that at least in my district, are very important. Number one, getting us out of this poverty wage economy. And right now in Arizona, we actually do have a pretty decent minimum wage that was passed by initiative. But with the rising cost of housing, rising cost of healthcare, rising cost of everything, even $15 an hour is still going to commit a lot of families to poverty. So I do think making permanent this earned income tax credit, and I would actually move it beyond families to give working class people an opportunity to get out of the poverty cycle really matters. And I think that would be something that would be helpful in turning out the Latino vote. A child care subsidy, which I would make universal, is very huge. I have a beautiful 4.5-year-old son, and even though I make a great wage, it still costs me money. I can't imagine what a family that makes on average $65,000 a year, having 2 kids, how they're going to be able to pay for their kids, child care until they go to at least pre-K or K, right? So I think that's the other one. And lastly, healthcare. It's just it's ridiculous what people are doing right now just to pay for bills. I can understand why some people are hesitant for Medicare for all, but there needs to be other steps in between until we actually get there. If that's not going to happen, right? A public option, I think, is the most important thing that we can do right away. It brings competition to the marketplace. It's going to give access to people to healthcare that never had it. And also at the same time, I do think we have to we have to move who is eligible for Medicaid to higher income levels and cover more people. We do those three things. I think you're going to have really an outpouring of support among voters, because if you look at the average minimum wage in Arizona for a family of, I think, four, it's only about $57,000. And I'm sorry, whoever thinks family of four making $57,000 a year is middle class, it's not. You're barely making it by. So these types of actions would help all those families from that level and down, and really, be better for this. It's just better for the economy to have people that aren't living in poverty, but it would also have good results and rewards at the ballot box.
Along the same lines, is there anything that you think the president can do with the stroke of a pen that might help solidify some of the Democratic vote, get people out to vote next year?
Well, anything he could do with immigration, I think, would be a huge step forward, especially solidifying the space for our dreamers to become U.S. citizens. And I think there's some theories of how you can do that. That if we can't get it through comprehensive immigration reform through the Senate. Also, just even trying to bring down the cost to apply to be a DACA for your DACA renewal. It's extremely high, sometimes above thousands of dollars. Or even for you to apply your citizenship. One of the things that people don't recognize is that the cost of for someone to go from a green card to apply for the citizenship has increased tremendously over the last decade, which discourages a lot of people from applying for citizenship. I also think in either bringing down the federal student debt rate to 0%, your interest rate 0%, or just forgiving is possible through the stroke of pen. I think that's extremely important. The reason I say that is because in Arizona, especially our brown and black communities that have been trying to get into middle class to actually move and be part of the American dream. Well, not coincidentally at all, as Arizona became browner and browner, the state support for public universities went down this way. And of course, our brown students decided to take out loans to, basically take part of it. And a lot of those are federal loans. We basically have put them into a debt cycle where they can't really afford to buy a house. They can't really afford to leave the job they have because they can't take a risk. And they're stuck, paying this debt. So I think reducing that debt, whether it's at least dropping down to 0% interest, so they could just pay it off without, in the foreseeable future, or forgiving a certain amount of that debt, I think would be huge in terms of both economic returns, as I said before, as well as getting people excited about supporting the Democratic agenda.
Yeah, everybody we talk to, Congressman, when we ask that question, it's $50,000 forgiveness. It's everybody zeroes in on that one because the benefits are so patently obvious that everybody wonders why it hasn't been done already. We have time for one more question. So I was intrigued. Earlier on, you said that that you have a theory that Democrats will win Arizona by even more in 2024 if Trump were to run.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit? It's because you've been so optimistic. Like, this is a great way to finish.
Right. I just remember I was one of the people that called it in 2010 that Arizona was going to be blue in 2020. So I have a decent track record here. Look, I think Arizona has continued to grow. We have a burgeoning Latino population. He's not going to do better with that population did last time. He's only going to do worse. And again, we're growing. I think Biden's approach, especially to the economy, is going to be really important in terms of doing better with a lot of swing voters than he did last time. And I think we hit the lowest possible numbers you could in rural Arizona. It wasn't, if it was any, if we could have hit like any worse numbers in terms of Democratic performance, it just wasn't possible. So I don't see us going below that level in the future because also the population of Arizona is also dropping. But I think, President Biden will even do 5 to 10 points better in that area. So overall, everything's going to shift more here. We're I think Arizona will be maybe a swing state in 2024 at the beginning of 2024. But I think towards the end, you'll see it being more closely aligned to New Mexico, somewhere between New Mexico and Colorado in terms of the Democratic performance. So I hope people will be able to shift to, turning Texas blue and turning North Carolina blue and solidifying Georgia at that point. As much as we love being in the limelight, what matters more is we, stay together as a country, and certainly can't happen under a Trump administration.
I love the optimism.
we are certainly rooting for the Republican Party to just rip itself to shreds there. I mean, just go after Maricopa County with all the GOP officials on the county board saying this is a sham audit, and the Republican Party at the state level saying, no, we got to do this, and we're going to ruin all your machines in the process. So, I mean, let them just claw it out.
It's sad. It's very sad. Actually, I'm friends with a lot of the Maricopa County GOP county supervisors. We've known each other for years, and I, worked with them on city councils and stuff of that nature. And it is odd to see them being treated as if they're, left-wing radicals, is what the Republican Party calls them. They're very much not that. They're very, middle of the road conservatives that just believe in, counting correctly and not, delving into weird conspiracy theories.
Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona's 7th Congressional District, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insight into what is, I really do believe, ground zero in America's fight for democracy today. Thanks.
Gracias. So I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay. That was fun.
It was fun. Man, Arizona really is where all the action is right now. And he didn't really want to criticize Kyrsten Sinema, and I get they have to work together. I mean, it's they're colleagues. I didn't realize that she actually was his boss at one time.
No,
so
I didn't know that either.
They have history.
Look, that just goes to show you, though. I mean, the people who are in these states and have been running in these states and live in these states, they have a much longer history, which is why I was hoping to get at least a little bit of insight from him on what's going on in Kyrsten Sinema's head, because none of us can really wrap our minds around it from the progressive standpoint, right?
Do you think you did? Did you learn anything?
Well, did I learn anything? Well, I think what I learned, so, your number one, he did come up with an example of her having changed her mind and moderated a position. Okay. So that's important, because if someone never changes their mind and moderates a position, then you've got a problem, because she's stuck on not getting rid of the filibuster. The other thing is, he seemed to genuinely think she was committed to Biden and Democrats delivering something and having a successful presidency. So that's hopeful. And by and large, the biggest takeaway is, and this should not surprise anybody, Kyrsten Sinema is a political operator, right? She went from being a pretty diehard progressive, I think, from a blue district, to moderating her positions in order to become senator, right? But she is worried about her political future. That matters to her, right? So I think it would be really hard for her to come out of Biden's presidency or Biden's first term having tanked like a reconciliation bill, voting rights, et cetera, and have any political future whatsoever. She didn't get to be senator by being dumb. And that would just be dumb unless she really plans on trying to switch political parties. But switching political parties in Arizona right now would be stupid, because the Republican Party is actually on, as the congressman said, is sort of on its way down, right? Rather than on its way up. If the Republican Party there were ascendant, then I would be like, we may have a problem here. But, it seems like she's going to find a way to get to a position. I don't know about voting rights in particular, but at least in terms of helping Biden have a successful presidency with a couple more wins under his belt before, next year.
Yeah, there's an argument that would say that it would make sense for Manchin to switch parties, given the state, West Virginia is a 40-point Trump state. There's no argument that suggests that Kyrsten Sinema would make sense for her to change parties. So I think she's stuck there, and for all her effort, and I to be clear, the congressman did not give her an out. The saying he didn't attack her, but he also basically said, like, hopefully she'll see the light. Hopefully she'll do this. She wants Biden to succeed, so hopefully she'll do these things that will help not just Joe Biden succeed, but he framed it in the sense of helping people succeed, right? That people are interested in helping people, not process. So he didn't give her an out. I just want to be clear.
I don't think he went soft on her. I mean, just so right.
I said it in a way that may have implied that he was defending her. I don't think he was defending her. He just didn't attack her. He didn't pile on.
Right. And he has to work with her. And he relayed over and over again that he thinks and hopes, not just hopes, but thinks that she'll come around to the positions that we need her to come around on. Now, I don't know if she's going to come around on every position, right? I mean, who knows? You could find, there could be a situation where she and Manchin agree to, a one-time workaround for the filibuster on voting rights because, hey, it's just that important to the future of democracy. And I think that's a political argument that you can make. We want the filibuster gone, but like if they were to find a one-time workaround for voting rights at this point in our history, I would take that. So
everybody knows the filibuster is a rule that can be changed by a majority vote. So they literally could come up with a new rule that, just like they did, the Republicans said, new rule, Supreme Court is no longer subject to a filibuster. Right. And before that, Harry Reid said, new rule, appellate court justices are no longer subject to a filibuster. The Democrats can come up today and say, new rule, anything having to do with voting rights is no longer subject to a filibuster. I mean, they could, whatever the rule is, they just need 50 people, all 50 Democratic senators to agree. And the problem with the whole filibuster is that right now you have Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and a couple other, like Dianne Feinstein of California, I think Tom Carper of Delaware, that are being squishy on the filibuster. But they could all decide that if this is important enough. And this is why, to me, if she's walking around saying, I'm a co-sponsor of this, for the People Act, voting rights legislation, you're not really a co-sponsor unless you do everything possible to make that happen. And as much as she's trying to win over independent voters, and Carrie, when you asked him what her motivation was, he said, he thinks that she's trying to appeal to independent voters. They don't vote in primaries. She still has to survive a primary. And if she's the consummate political survivor, and God knows, she broke a losing streak, a decades-long Democratic losing streak in Arizona when she won. She broke she did something that hadn't been done since the 70s.
And let's remember that Martha McSally would be the senator there if the Republican senator there if she hadn't. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry, go.
Right. So she is not a dumb person. Like you said, Carrie, she is incredibly smart. She may be among the smarter people but right now, I think she's taken the progressive base for granted. I think she's taken the fact that she could win a primary for granted. And at some point that's going to sink in.
She's going to wake up. The other thing is I've been sort of, operating under the impression, not that I knew this for sure, but just as a guess, right? That if Manchin found a way toward coming around on some of these things, particularly on the filibuster, maybe a one-time workaround, maybe reforming it so it's a talking filibuster, whatever it might be, that Kyrsten Sinema would not end up being the lone holdout that sunk the whole enterprise. And I come away from this conversation with the congressman thinking that's true, believing that he kind of confirmed. I mean, he didn't say this, right? I'm not trying to put words into his mouth, but my impression was, she doesn't want to be the lone holdout on this that sinks sort of like a Biden domestic agenda. I don't think she does. I never thought she did want to be that person, but Manchin to some extent gives her cover to be like, well, I'm with this guy, he's from a center, he's from a right, leaning, very, very right leaning.
Not right leaning.
Right.
One of the reddest states.
A red state, right. A very red state. And, I'm from a purple state. And, I think that gives her some sort of cover that she's sort of walking this moderate line. But if he were to, I mean, she doesn't want to be to the right of Joe Manchin.
No.
I just really don't believe that. I just don't believe that. And I don't think she is. But, I walked away from this conversation thinking, yeah, she doesn't want to be to the right of Joe Manchin on anything. If Joe Manchin comes around on reconciliation, which he seems open to, said she's open to too. I just don't think she's going to be the lone holdout that sinks some big bill, some big progressive priority alone, right? She needs the cover of other people.
Yeah. I was also struck by his optimism for both 2022 and 2024, although 2024 was in the context of this, if Trump runs again, right? So if Trump's not running, maybe that might not apply, but 2022 for sure. He caveated it, of course, saying if Democrats deliver, right? And this is what we've been talking about every single week. It's what we write about every day at Daily Kos, is that Democrats have to deliver. But Arizona really is, I mean, if there's going to be a state that it's going to tie itself to Trump stronger than Arizona, I don't see it. And there's some pretty crazy Trump states out there, but Arizona is going that extra step, and Trump is loving it, right? They're catering. This whole cyber ninja thing is catering to Trump's pompous ego. And so I fully expect Trump to spend a lot of time in Arizona. And in fact, I think he is going to Arizona in the next couple of days for a rally. And so rather than make 2022 a referendum on Joe Biden, which is a standard case in a normal midterm election, we really, I think, have a chance because it'll be a referendum on Donald Trump, and they want it. Like, this is what they want, which is a gift to us. And he saw it the way we did, right, Carrie? I mean, he confirmed anyway.
He did,
bolstered
but
our theory.
He bolstered our theory, but one of the things that he rooted it in, which I mean, I think we rooted in sometimes at the federal level, but he was talking in particular at the state level, was what a level of desperation the Republican Party at the state level in Arizona is in, and how it's really just a fundraising gimmick. They needed to give the MAGA base. It was a great point, right? They needed to give the MAGA base something. It wasn't just about getting his voters out. It was about, just like ripping as much money from their hands as they possibly could. That's what the state Republican Party is doing there, because it's desperate. And I think, I always think of Kevin McCarthy at the national level as being desperate to be Speaker of the House, right? I think of Republicans being desperate to get Trump's voters out in order to hopefully win more elections, right? That the turnout that they saw in 2020 just has them sort of salivating over that idea. But I sometimes forget about what level of desperation some of these parties at the state level are. And the Republican Party sounds like it's in a desperate moment in Arizona. And the congressman is in a much better position than either you or I to know that. Of course, if they were really doing well, he probably wouldn't tell us either. But no, he seemed pretty like he wasn't even. There was no hesitation.
No, he was jazzed about it.
Yeah. And the other thing I thought was interesting was he said, "Look, I'm hoping that we're gonna move from this purple state, from this political sea change into sort of a New Mexico type blue state." Very soon. And then, hopefully we can concentrate on making sure that Georgia makes that transition, that Texas makes that transition, whatever. And I thought it was interesting that he put Arizona ahead of Georgia on the progression of that transition, right? So we spent a lot of time talking about about Georgia, but it's interesting to think that he feels like the Democratic Party there is further along that progression than in Georgia.
Yeah, I think part of it is that Black turnout in Georgia is much higher than Latino turnout in Arizona and American Indian turnout in Arizona. So there's a lot more low-hanging fruit, and it's not so low-hanging. That's the problem, right? But there's gains to be made there with core Democratic constituencies. While in Georgia, they're still there to be made. There's still non-performing core Democratic constituencies in Georgia, but there's not as many. And the state with the most is Texas. Like Texas Latinos are like absolutely brutal voter performance, right? So a big part of that, and it's obviously something we didn't really get to it with him, but he's really focused a lot in that turning out that Latino vote. It's obvious. I mean, obviously his district is heavily Latino. He himself is Latino. It's a personal crusade of his, and I think it benefits all Democrats in Arizona. And I would love to see him primary Kyrsten Sinema if she doesn't get with the program. So,
why did you ask him that question?
It was clear that
but you may as well put him on the spot and see what he has to say.
Yeah, he's probably so relieved I didn't ask him that. I was like, he's gonna brush it off.
Here I am trying to get into Sinema's head, and you're like glossing over this, the elephant in the room. Yeah, anyway, honestly, that didn't occur to me. Maybe that makes me a crappy political reporter. But anyway,
no. She's not up for re-election until 2024. So it's way early.
Way too early, right? That's fair.
About primarying, and there's no way there's no way a politician's going to say, who's trying to work with her on legislation and actually stuff done, it's going to say, by the way, I'm primarying you in 4 years.
No, but let's make them sweat here. Come on, Marcos. Goodness.
The demographic possibility in Arizona is huge. And the other piece he made is that those rural areas, and we talked about rural areas before on the show, and we got an episode coming up in a week or two on rural areas. So clearly it's a topic that's of interest to us. And a big factor there is that older, whiter, male Republicans are in large part dying off. So every year there's that demographic shift where younger, browner, American Indians, Latinos, Black, Arizonans are turning 18 or get older. Even 18-year-olds don't vote so much, right? But as they get older, they start becoming more likely to vote. And then you have those older white Republicans dying. And once you die, you're very not likely to vote at all. So it makes it more difficult, which again, it's part of that piece of why are Republicans tying themselves to Donald Trump when it is fueling their losses amongst the nation's growth demographics. And Arizona is not immune to that. So I don't know if it's going to be a New Mexico by 2024. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
But by 2028, it's actually fairly possible.
I didn't realize until he said it how poorly we had done in terms of turnout. Democrats had done in terms of turnout in rural areas of Arizona. So obviously, like rural areas tend to go towards Trump and Republicans, right? That has been kind of their bread and butter. But I didn't realize he was basically said that like this was a baseline. But the other dynamic, like this was like the lowest bar we've hit in a while. That was kind of what he was suggesting, and I didn't realize it had been that bad. So he had hoped that Democrats could come up from there. But the other interesting thing is like Maricopa County is so big and massive at this point in the state that it seems like whatever way it really leans is what way the state ends up going. Now, I don't know what the exact percentage is that it has to go by for Democrats for it to just be like game over. I actually don't know that number, but that suburb, that the Maricopa County and the suburbs, it's kind of like, as I understand it, just like I haven't been to Arizona. I've been to Arizona, but I haven't spent a lot of time there. Like it's just a huge, giant suburban mass, right? Yeah, Maricopa County. And it's growing, and it's growing in the direction of Democrats, just like suburbs almost everywhere are. And you start to wonder if what he sees also is the fact that county could just end up leaning so far Democratic that at that point, it doesn't matter as much what Republicans managed to do in the rural areas. It can't overcome that juggernaut of a county. And that's the county where this sham audit is taking place. That's the county where state Republicans are calling the Republican county board members, supervisors of that election, like, you know, like Democrats, like socialists and whatever. That's the Senate Republicans have gone to war with the biggest county in that state. It's a political juggernaut, and they are pissing off every voter who even the voters who like maybe voted for Republicans down ballot, but didn't want to vote for Trump. They are absolutely pissing off all of those voters. And I just can't like wrap my mind around what a like stupid thing, but obviously born of extreme desperation by which you would do that, right?
Yeah, that county board is 100% Republican because this was a county that used to be very Republican. And so by attacking, and maybe the state Senate, you know, which is dominated by rural, you know, state senators, of course, maybe they're seeing these as the enemy now because these are the Republicans that are defecting. They're college educated. They're more worldly, right? They travel and they see other cultures and they get on a plane and travel to a different country and have a passport, all crazy things.
That is nuts.
No, right. It just and so the way they're treating that county board is almost like they decided that they're all Democrats anyway at this point. And yeah, you're right. This may very well be accelerating that transition from people who have historically voted Republican. And switching parties is not easy, Carrie. It's like switching religion. I mean, it is that ingrained in, you know, we know this from psychology that a party identification is like your religion. And so switching it is a gut-wrenching thing. I actually did it. I was a Republican growing up. And when I was about 24, I changed parties. Even back then, with just a few years of partisan allegiance, it was hard. I can't imagine having 30, 40 years and then realizing, like, damn, I gotta switch parties. So it's
maybe they just don't vote. Maybe some of them just don't. I mean, I get the sense that there were a lot of Republicans sort of holding out and thinking, well, once Trump is gone, you know, my party will get back. The party that I remember will get back to being more reasonable, right? Yeah. And so I'll vote against him at the top of the ticket, and I'll vote for some of these other Republicans down ticket who I know personally and think are good people, et cetera, whatever they thought, you know. But this is just, you know, completely over the top.
It could be our version of the Dixiecrats, right? They may not go and switch party ID, but they just happen to randomly vote for Democrats, you know, down the line until maybe they see their party just come back.
A protest vote.
Yeah, exactly. So, Carrie, we're almost out of time. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the series we're going to be doing this fall, because Arizona is going to be one of the states that is part of that series. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. What's series? No, I'm just kidding. So we're in the planning stages of a series this coming fall where we're going to start in September, going through the states that are going to be critical to next year's elections, midterm elections. And we're covering, you know, all the states, of course, that will have major Senate races, but we're also going to cover some others. And in some cases where Democrats are protecting Senate seats too. But in that, we're going to fill out, other races of interest, might be gubernatorial, might be Secretary of State, might be, might be a number, who knows, a number of congressional seats that we might make pickups on or need to protect, whatever the dynamics of that state are. And we're going to take each state episode by episode. So we'll have someone on and we don't know who our guests are yet, but we'll have some very smart people on, someone who will give us sort of an overall overview of the state, as well as someone who is working hopefully for a grassroots group within that state. And the whole idea is to get people bought into and excited about what we can do next year, what we really need to do to save democracy next year. And hopefully, having our listeners take some ownership over what they can do to help these grassroots groups out. Some of the early money that we can give to help them register voters might be also giving money to state parties who are doing, some really interesting stuff to register voters, because most important is that we don't get to the last 2 months or 3 months of the cycle, and then everybody drops a bunch of money into these campaigns, and they're so flush with money, they buy a bunch of ads that, end up not moving the needle. But what could have been more important and had a bigger return on investment was early money to get people registered, to get people excited to vote, and to build out the infrastructure for making these get for GOTV when the time comes.
Yeah, I love this idea. It was Carrie's idea, and I'm 100% aboard precisely for that reason, because we're smart activists, and we know that if we donate that money late, and a lot of money will flow in late with ActBlue, and we know it's going to go in late, it is all pissed away on TV ads that don't do anything. But if we can get people to donate money early, a year out before the election, they can use that to get people registered to vote. They can hire organizers to knock on doors. These are things that actually do demonstrably earn votes. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. It's what Daily Kos does best. I'm so excited to get that on the going this fall. So look out for that and get ready to get in early on this effort to, and I don't think it's hyperbole, Carrie, it's an effort to save our democracy.
Absolutely.
Republicans have made it very clear that they will not change ideologically to appeal to the changing American electorate. So they are doubling down on minority rule, using the institution, the machinery of elections to lock in minority rule by keeping our people from voting, preferencing theirs, and things like the Senate filibuster to make sure that a majority cannot govern. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And that is our show for today. Thank you so very much. Thank Carrie. Thanks to Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona. Thank you, Walter Einenkel, for producing the show. And thank you, the listeners, for joining us. If you want to continue the conversation, you can join us at dailykos.com or on Twitter at Daily Kos. Thank you very much. See y'all next week.